o'clock and not 6 o'clock. So I see all the members are present. So I'm going to call the meeting of the Pasadena Area Community College District Budget and Audit Committee to order. And welcome everyone, and ask if there's any public comment on non-agenda items.
Not tonight.
Okay, thank you. I then will look for approval of the March 9th minutes. We're going to have to separate these, I think.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. I believe I remember reading them, but I think March 9th was the one I was at. So I can vote for that. So all in favor, please say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Ask approval on the May 11th minutes.
Wasn't there.
I was there, so motion to approve.
Okay, you weren't there on May 11th, Tammy?
No.
Okay, maybe it's the March one I wasn't at then. I read them, but I didn't print them out.
It's my son's commencement from USC.
Okay, I think I need to abstain on the March 9th,
Yeah.
but I can
well,
second the May 11th.
Let's revise the vote on the March 9th. Will
Yeah.
you abstain, Job?
I'm
Just
going to
in
abstain
case.
on March
Yeah.
9th, so it
Yeah.
still passes. And I will second the May 11th. I'm getting my dates a little confused. So any discussion in favor, please say aye. Raise
Aye.
your hand. Aye. Tammy, you're going to abstain, I think. I see one abstention. Okay, that brings us to B1, tentative budget.
I'm sorry, Trustee Martin. Could
Yes.
we reorder the agenda since we do have our bond initiative folks here? Could we take item B2
Certainly.
or B1?
Certainly, let's go right there. Bond initiative. Go ahead, Dr. Andrianos.
Well, I'm going to turn it right over to Candace Jones.
Okay.
Hi, thank you all. Let me share my screen. We've got a lot to cover this evening, so we're going to jump right in. All right. Everybody can see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we want to give an update around our November 2022 general obligation bond measure. I am fortunate, you see all these faces here this evening, to be joined by a group of professionals who've really been working with me for the last year, even as we came out of our COPs and into sort of thinking about calling for a bond in 2022. And so I'm going to actually ask them to introduce themselves and kind of the role that they play on the project, and then we are going to get started. So maybe we'll start with Charles first.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Charles Seath. I'm a partner with TBWBH Props and Measures, and we serve as the strategy and communications consultants for the bond program.
Maybe Maurizio.
Yeah, thanks, Candace. Hi, this is Mauricio Salazar. I am with Norton Rose Fulbright, and we serve as bond counsel.
Thank you. And Trennis?
Hello, everyone. I'm Trennis Wright. I now work for Raymond James, previously with another firm, but now with Raymond James, and we'll be working on the project as the bond underwriter.
And Rachel.
Thank you, Candace. My name is Rachel Chen-Kuei, Senior Vice President here with Philman Rollap and Associates, and we serve the district as your financial advisor and fiduciary.
And a PCC alum.
A proud one. Thank you.
All right, and so each of us, I mean, we're sharing portions of this presentation, and so any one of us may jump in and answer a question, but it sort of be fluid between us as we sort of cover really important information. I do want to say, at any point, if you want to just, I'll be watching for you all. If you want to pause us or ask a question, I don't want us to get any further down the line, and so we forget our moments and our questions, because this is really important information for us in the district to consider. So I'll be watching for you all, but feel free to interrupt or pause us if you have a question before we move to further along. All right, so here's what we're going to cover this evening. We're going to walk through sort of a recap of where we've been. We're going to do some conversation around the GO bond tax rate analysis, share out what is a proposed draft project list and draft bond resolution language, and some timeline and next steps. And so when I think we're really intentional about saying draft, because while we have worked really hard and we feel very proud of the work that we've done thus far, we want to make sure that you all feel like there's opportunity for adjustments to be made, or questions to be had. And so this is just one of our first moments. We'll be back again in July to do that again, but it's really to get some feedback from you all, or to make adjustments, or even just answer questions. So again, don't feel like anything is set in stone, and we're here to collect feedback not only today, but also at the board meeting on next Wednesday, the 15th. All right, so let's walk through a quick recap. So you all did a wonderful job in approving our 10-year facilities master plan in May of 2020. And so the college really went through this really robust, diligent effort to express its need, to look at its programs and growth patterns, to solidify and then move forward with community input, this vision around where our facilities were going to go in the next 10 years. And so thinking about that, in order to fund those needed facility improvements that have been identified in the existing plan, the most common financing option available to us in the K-14 in general is going to be the issuance of a general obligation bond, or GO bond. So just as a reminder, the voter approval rate for that is 55%. So we have to go to voters for approval. PCC currently only has one GO bond authorization, which is our measure piece, which we closed out last year. And it was supported by 69.8% of the voters back in March of 2002. So we've been very fortunate to have really great community support. Yes, Trustee Osterling.
And Candace, remind us, how many years does that have to run, i.e. how many years of overlap are we going to have? And if that's later in the presentation.
Yeah, we'll hold that.
I'll hold that question. Thank you. Yeah,
you're welcome, but we've got it. In early of 2021, we went through this initiative of issuing certificates of participation, or COPs, which were issued in March, and it was really designed to cover PCC's portion of the construction of the Serafian building, which we received some state matching funds for. They were structured in our thought process at that time, and continues to be, that it was structured with capitalized interest and a short date option for PCC to call and repay those with GO bond proceeds. That was the strategy when we went into that initiative for that $27 million. But I want to make sure that we remember that the end point of that is August of 2023, where we would have to start making payments if we did not pay off the COPs using bond proceeds. So August 2023. So we have some time, but we want to be thoughtful about that. Uh-oh, there we go. So if you think about this sort of year-long process that we've been working through our bond program and thought process to come back to you, in November of 2021, we did some initial presentations to the Board of Trustees related to an overview of what that would look like, the timeline, some tax rate analysis, and for a potential 2022 bond. That analysis at the time showed us that we could issue between $565 million to $698 in bonds, depending on the local tax rate. as well as local support. And so with that board input, there was a lot of conversation that you all asked us to go back and do a bond feasibility study, which Charles is actually going to sort of recap for us to sort of bring present to mind where we were at in that feasibility study.
Didn't we already hear the feasibility study?
You did?
Yeah, this is just a summary of the highlights, just to kind of orient the rest of our conversation today.
Okay.
So yeah, we were at your board meeting in February presenting the results of our feasibility study. I was there along with Dr. Tim McClarney from True North Research. And you'll probably remember that we presented encouraging news when we conducted an opinion poll of the voters in your district that are likely to vote in the November 2022 election, and presented to them different potential bond scenarios. We found support between the 62 and 64% mark, so comfortably above the 55% threshold. The margin of error of that survey was plus or minus 3.5%. So even if you apply sort of the most pessimistic reading of the poll results, we're still above 55%. But in addition to giving us kind of overall guidance on the viability of the bond, the survey also gave us a helpful sense of the types of projects that voters prioritize, and also some good information about the sensitivity to potential bond amounts and tax rates. So Candace, if you'll advance the slide. So this is one of the charts from our presentation in February. This is the initial ballot test where we presented to voters two potential bonds, one on the high side at the $698 million level. That requires a tax rate of $25 per 100,000 of assessed value. And we saw 62% support for that proposal. We also tested a slightly scaled down option, $565 million. And that requires a tax rate of $20 per 100,000. But in either scenario, again, at the beginning of the survey, before we assume any campaigning or other efforts to try to persuade or mobilize voters, we're starting in a strong position above 55%. And as I mentioned, the polling also gave us a sense of the types of projects. This is a long list that were presented to voters so they could give us feedback on how they would like to see bond dollars spent. And without going through the entire list here, first of all, everything on the list is fairly popular. Even the least popular projects down there at the bottom are supported by more than 60% of your voters. But sort of the top priority items fit into three basic categories. The initial one being just basic repairs to aging facilities, roofs, plumbing, electrical, kind of those items that you have no choice but to address. The second category that resonated with your voters is upgrades to support STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math. Those themes really seem to resonate. And then the last thematic category is projects related to supporting job training and career preparation. So, and as we look later on at the draft of the potential bond resolution and project list, you'll see those same thematic categories highlighted.
If I remember back to the meeting, I think I asked the question that a new campus or new satellites didn't seem to be one of the potential questions. Am I remembering that correctly? I think I asked that, and I think that was, so we really don't know how that would fare, that topic would fare against some of the other relative categories. But
it's listed as one of the things we could spend our money on.
Yeah, no, yeah, but that's not the point here. The point is we're trying to see what voters deemed high priorities, and something that was, in my opinion, a very potential high priority wasn't a potential on the list, was the point I'm trying to refresh us on.
So in the battery of projects that we were just looking at, there was an item, I'll read it to you here: improve classrooms, facilities at satellite campuses so that all students have equal access to facilities, technology, and education they need to succeed. So the idea of satellite facilities was touched on in the poll, but just in a single question. And we certainly heard you at the meeting in February that that's an area worthy of some further investigation. And so we're planning to do an updated tracking survey later in June, and we'll certainly make sure that we delve into the satellite campus issue in that poll.
And Charles, if I recall, you commented that probably it would go over well in the location where that area where that satellite might be located and not be as high of a priority in the other areas.
The challenge with satellite campuses generally is that obviously they offer significant appeal to the folks that are close by, but whenever you sort of offer more geographically limited projects, they're not going to resonate as widely. So, but that's part of what we'll look at in the tracking survey is kind of how you frame the issue for maximum appeal.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the last chart with the different ratings from 59.3 down to 33. And I'm trying to find the one that you just addressed, that long, which one? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it in there.
Yep. It's the third from the bottom.
Third from the bottom. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
So even though it's the third from the bottom, it's still pretty popular.
71% of people said they were at least somewhat more likely to favor a bond that includes that project.
And Charles, let me ask you a challenging question. When you gave that report in February, a lot has changed between now and then, including a war in Ukraine and inflation that we thought was going to happen is now happening, and gas price spikes. And it's a challenging question because short of actually going out and doing all your work all over again in June, you don't know the answer. But like, for example, have you done other polling since then, districts where you did other polling now with the headwinds that have arisen since between February and now?
It's an excellent question, and certainly something we're thinking a lot about, kind of in our ever-changing, ever-evolving environment here. So a couple of points. Yes, we're doing lots of polling for school and college districts all over the state. We certainly, as inflation and gas prices have become more of a top-of-mind issue in the last few months, we've seen greater tax sensitivity. It just kind of stands to reason. But with that said, we in most communities and communities like yours that tend to be fairly supportive of these types of public investments, we haven't seen it be a deal breaker. In fact, just yesterday, and I hesitate to say this because the ballots are still being counted, but I had about a half dozen bond measures on the ballot yesterday. And, fingers and toes crossed that they'll all hang on, but they're all passing, and they're all more or less tracking with the polling that we did, many months ago in order to get on the June ballot. So I think there's reason to continue to be optimistic, but that's exactly why we're going to go through this tracking survey later this month. So we have updated data to make these decisions based upon.
Well, actual ballot results is even more valuable than polling. So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So you're involved in 6 ballot measures that were on the ballot yesterday, and it appears they're all going to pass.
Correct.
Great, that's good to hear.
Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? I'm just curious. So you do a lot of polling across California, I'm assuming. Would you say in general, most communities favorability ratings track similar to ours? By that, I mean repairs, upgrade for STEM, job training. Are those the high priorities across the state? Or do you find there's just local nuances and these kind of are up and down differently?
While there are some local nuances based on kind of specialty programs offered at a college, for the vast majority of community colleges, the general themes we're seeing in your polling are pretty consistent with what we see elsewhere. Kind of 21st century skills, STEM related education tends to be a top priority, job and career preparation. And then, most voters who also tend to be homeowners just get it that you got to invest in the roofs and plumbing and those basic repairs. So nothing uncommon about those priorities.
Thank you.
So my question was, when you see numbers like these, how many bonds would not pass in your experience with numbers like these?
Very few. If you're starting above 60% and well outside the margin of error of the survey, I'd say the passage rate is well north of 90% for measures that start in that type of a position.
Okay, thank you.
I will offer this caveat though, and this is actually a perfect segue to my last slide, is that we did measure some tax rate sensitivity in your first poll. And so that $698 million bond that we tested requires a $25 per 100,000 tax rate. And in this question that's represented on the slide here, we basically focused voters down on just the cost component. And whenever you do that in a survey, you're going to see support decrease because you're talking about the cost rather than the benefit. But it gives you a good sense of what happens to support if the cost of the measure becomes a focus of the community conversation. And you can see here that at $25 per 100,000, we dropped down to 50%, so below the passage threshold. At $20 per 100,000, we're back essentially right at the passage threshold, and we continue to go up a little bit as the tax rate goes down. Now, this was a question that was fairly early in the survey, and after this, we had sort of planted the seed in the voters' mind about what the cost might be. We provided more information about what the bond would fund, potential arguments pro and con, and support rebounded back up north of 60% later in the survey. So I don't think that this is a deal breaker, but I think we'd also be wise to learn from this and take sort of the price point into consideration. And our recommendation coming out of the first poll was keep it around that $20 per 100,000 mark. We will investigate this same question set again in the updated poll, and we'll come back with an updated recommendation. But we've been sort of assuming based on the initial polling that we'd want to be around that $20 per 100,000 mark.
Which is how much?
596 million, but that is actually a perfect segue to our next section, which is all about the bond and tax rate analysis.
Great, thank you, Charles. And I will cover the first couple of slides in this particular section. And as Candace and Charles mentioned about that range of 565 million to 698 million with the authorization amount, these are the same slides that we presented to you last November, but just wanted to take the opportunity and recap for the committee here. So if you're looking at this slide here, the top chart represents what the tax rate will look like. And right now, for modeling purposes, we're assuming 4 separate bond issuances under this potential November 2002 ballot measure. And if you look to the table to the bottom, that's what shows the potential principal amount as well as project amount and final maturities associated with each of those series. Not to read all the numbers to you, but as you can see on the far right-hand column of the table, that's the 565 million of authorization. After paying costs associated with them, we're estimating 561 million of project funding. The plan is to take advantage of efficient structure. So all of these bonds, the plan is to have them repay within 25 years for each of the individual series. So the final maturity for the entire program will land on August 1, 2052. Again, this is just for modeling purposes to help us have an estimated figure to include in those surveys. We'll continue to update them. We'll continue to refine them as we move forward. And of course, if the bond passes, every time we enter the market for an issuance, we'll have time to recalibrate. And when I talk about assumptions, since general obligation bonds are repaid by voter-approved property taxes, we need to assume certain trends or increases in the property values. So we have assumed conservative property tax increases, roughly 3% per year moving forward. And on the interest rate too, Trustee Ostering earlier mentioned about the inflation as well as gas prices. I think on everyone's mind, we've also seen interest rate trending upwards. Here we're looking at conservative assumptions again, because we're not using today's interest rates or November 2020-21 interest rate to build the model. We're looking at a historical average looking for the past 15 years. Again, understanding that we're building a program for the next 10 years, hopefully looking back historically for the past 15 years would give us an educated estimate moving forward. And the next slide here is the numbers and charts associated with $25 per 100,000 of tax rate. This gives you 698 million of total authorization. And then as you can see on this particular one here, and just to remind the board, $25 per 100,000 is the maximum tax rate allowed for community college districts if we would like to pursue a Proposition 39 general obligation bond. If there are no questions, the next slide, I'll hand it
So,
over to.
I don't have a question, but I'm gonna just make a comment. So the good news is that probably the property value today versus when you did this are significantly higher, and the 3%, I mean, even the starting number that the initial assessment, I'm guessing, would break favorably for us. I guess the flip side of that is with interest rates climbing, there's going to be a larger proportion going to interest than you may have originally projected as we see what's happening to interest rates. I mean, I'm just trying to connect the dots in a high level, very simplistic concept that I can understand. Would you say that's a correct statement on both of those fronts?
Absolutely. When it comes to assessed valuation, right now we don't have more update information coming from Los Angeles County Auditor Controller's Office, since they release the data around summer every year. So hopefully we'll have that information in the next few months, and we'll be able to present you with updated information. I do want to caution that when it comes to assessed value, those are value as of, so there's a lag for the county to equalize the roll and so on. So the value we'll receive in the upcoming months will be based of January 1 of 2022. So there is a lag. Some of the property increase in values that we saw in the past 12 months may not be fully captured, but it certainly sets us certainly at a good starting place. So those things counteract each other. Of course, interest rates may be higher than what we anticipated. And right now I can say, just based on current interest rates, these particular scales that we use to build the model, we're still being conservative, but no one knows what the interest rates would do in the future. And same thing with assessed value. So we also looked at the historical tax base increases within the district's boundaries, and we've seen some very healthy increases year over the year. And this past year, 2021-22 tax year, we saw greater than 3% increase, and we'll continue to bring updates and refine the model.
So with a 2/1/23 issue date for Series A, which tax base year would be the base year for that? Would it be January of 22, or would it be January of 23?
So it would be January of 2022, since by the time, based on this model, February of 2023, we wouldn't have new data coming out in that new fiscal year. So it would be based on the 22-23 tax base, but that's set of 2022.
And I'm sure these are timed based on a construction schedule and project list, and it's very complicated. When does the January 1st, 2023 data become the new base data? Is there a month in the year that usually is solidified?
Generally speaking, that would be released by the county in July of 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Well, on that point, question for Candace and Erica: if this passes and we did an issuance in February of 2023 of 165 million, do we even have $165 million of projects that are approved,
Hold that
shovel-ready?
question.
Hold that, yeah. We'll
Do
get
you
there.
have a question, Tammy? Your hand's up
Yes,
on the thing.
I did.
Oh, I'm
Just
sorry.
hop in here. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is, why do the Series C and Series D bonds end in the same year when D is sold 3 years later?
That's a great question. I think, again, this is for modeling purposes, and then we wanted to make sure that they provide roughly equal par amounts, since we don't have the construction schedule and so on. So we're also assuming that Series D, the overall repayment would be a little shorter than 25 years as Series A, B, and C. So again, these are just preliminary models to make sure we have educated numbers to include in the survey, but as we learn more on assessed values, interest rates, and even the construction phasing schedules, we'll be sure to update them. And at that time, we can certainly revisit what the final maturity might look like for each of the series, as well as the entire program.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay. So Trustee Oshling, I believe you're the one that asked how long we have an existing bond measure. How long is that going to be overlapping this one? And so the top graph addresses that question. So that's your Measure P, passed in 2002. And you can see there that the final maturity of that one is fiscal year 2030-31. So that is how long, 9 years basically from now, that thing will be paid off. Why is it that time? Your last new issue out of that measure was in 2009 for any new money. And then you've done 3 refinancings of that measure since then. And so in 2014, 16, and 20. So that is pretty favorable, right? So you're going to be less than $10 for the next 5 years. And after that, drop to below $3. And again, we're using only assessed valuation growth to determine the tax rates, only using 3%, right? And there's an inverse relationship between how fast property growth goes and how high these tax rates are. So this is a pretty conservative estimate, I guess is what I'm saying. So there's no questions on the above graph. And remember, that's per 100,000 as well. It's not per household, but it's per 100,000 of assessed value, right? So this past fiscal year, or I guess we're still in it, but we're about to go on the next one, but is $899 was what was on the county's roll. So the average, or sorry, the median homeowner in your district would be paying about $50 this past fiscal year to support that measure.
And question on this graph, how do all of these colleges have numbers above 25 per 100,000? Is that because they've stacked multiple issuances over the years?
So it really goes back to multiple measures, right? They've had multiple bond measures. Like you look at Santa Monica, which is the king of bond measures, at least by number. I mean, they've got 4 on their textual bond measures, 02, 04, 08, and 2016. And then just last night, they voted to pass, to put another one on. Yeah, so they're the king of bond measures. But right now, right, they're holding around $65. But I think the bond measure they've got right now, the 2016 one, I don't even think that's hit the roll yet. And so
their property values are higher than ours, so they have.
Yeah, having Malibu helps, right? So
Yeah,
we all want to be in Malibu, right? So yeah, it really does.
Santa Monica is. Oh, never mind.
So, but that's a good snapshot, right? To show your local districts who's charging what in the past fiscal year, because I would be curious, right, as a taxpayer. So, but like I said, most of them are multiple measures. Santa Monica's got 5 on there. Long Beach has 3, and they have a long way to go because I do the bonds for them. They have a long way to go before their bond measure is exhausted. So they're going to be tacking more on there. Mount Sac has, I guess they have 3 bond measures total, but again, they had a big one in 2018 that has a lot more to go on it. So that'll be good.
well, and the LACCD has 4.
We left them on there.
A, AA, J, and CC.
Yeah, we didn't put them on there only because
Yeah,
I guess they really are they're the emperor, I guess, of taxes on the roll, because it would dwarf everybody else and make the graph look insignificant.
yeah.
So, but good point.
In terms of rate per 100,000, they're so far they're taxing their.
Because they have so many different measures, right? Because it's $25 is your maximum per measure, right? So if you passed a measure in 22, you get a $25 max. Well, if you pass another one in 24, that's a fresh $25. And Los Angeles CCD is like San Francisco and San Diego, and then you're unique in the sense that those large jurisdictions they tend to put them on there very frequently, even when they don't need the money. I mean, I think LA's got 3 measures that still have authorization to them,
Mhm.
and they plan on going again, right? And so it's just, they want to have the capacity to finance improvements. But again, they have to start over to get another $500 million. They got to start over with a fresh $25 to fund it. So they've got, I think you're right, Dr. Jones, 4 measures.
Yeah, 4.
That's outstanding. Yeah. But hopefully that's helpful.
All right, let's talk through our draft project list and the draft bond resolution. Remember, we started with sort of the conversation about our facilities master plan that was approved in 2020. And so what the team at PCC did with Richard and the work that we've been doing to sort of figure out how we think about potential projects for this initial bond issuance. And so you'll see that we have sort of 5 project category, 5 groupings of projects that come directly from the facilities master plan. Now, a couple of things to note. These are not intended to be in any sort of order, because I think what we would want to do is continue. The wonderful thing about our facilities master plan is there's a lot of flexibility in it. There's a lot of flexibility that allows us to adjust our priorities based on the district need anytime within that 10-year plan. It allows us to get priorities from the board and approval from the board as to how we phase and think about those projects. So Trustee Osterling, when you said, do we have, shovel-ready projects? So Richard has been working very diligently to have to precede some of the work. One in which we just talked about today at the facilities subcommittee, right? Our Galloway project, plaza. There's work on the mirror pools. But if you think about these project groupings, sort of that grouping A is like utilities upgrades. There's an incredible amount of work that is needed to support all of the additional sort of any construction projects on this campus, or just aging infrastructure in general. And so we feel very comfortable, Richard feels very comfortable that he has enough project ready work to get started. And so what we did was also try to tag, if you look at the project grouping, there is then an designation in terms of how much that project grouping is estimated at. So there's about $71 million here, keeping in front of mind that we're also needing to repay our COPs. There's additional project grouping here around, we've had lots of conversation around a new STEM building, conversation around build out of Galloway Plaza. There are 2 items that have an asterisk on them that are related to some ongoing conversations related to the FMP. And so that's both the Lot 4 extension, parking lot extension, and then the pool relocation piece. And so if you remember, our ongoing conversations about whether we move the pool to another location, each of those things, again, can adjust based on the campus's needs. And if so, then there are some adjustments in terms of how much funding is needed for those particular projects. Technology modernization is something that, again, sort of thinking about our network and our infrastructure and our classrooms and modernizing them for our students is something that those are things that we can move on fairly quickly as well. We have an expression in the FMP around a new student services building itself and some new construction there, a new academic building and a new plaza, which is that sort of outside area related to maybe having some instructional activity happening outside, more green space on the campus as expressed in the FMP. All of that is to say these project groupings are just representations. The actual bond resolution draft language gives additional sort of clarity on the project. So fire life safety would be those things that are expressed there. And you'll know that while in the original FMP, There wasn't that satellite campus strategy expressed in the FMP. You will see the satellite campus conversation come up in the draft bond resolution language that allows us to use bond proceeds for those purposes as well. Yes, Trustee Osterling.
So the two asterisk items, if those are included on the risk, we run the risk of creating opposition to the bond issuance. And we've talked about this before. And I thought we were not going to move the new pool, and I don't know where I thought we ended up with the lot 4, but the lot 4 is the parking structure down at the south end of the project property.
So Trustee Osterling, I just want to pop in and say, when we say new pool, it's not to move the pool. The pool needs to be new. It's going to
Okay.
stay where it is. It might turn depending on the shape and size of the academic building, but it's not moving to where it was before.
Thank you. Yeah, we want to make that real clear to
Yeah.
our neighbors to the south.
Eh.
Have we adjusted the FMP to reflect that?
We have not yet, which is also why those asterisks sort of are tagged at this point, but we would be moving again with board direction on those pieces. The only other piece with the lot 4 extension, while again, certainly we have done such a goodwill effort with our Del Mar neighbors, and so we don't want to kick that up. We also need to be thoughtful related to the loss of our lots 10 and 11. And so that's also why they're tagged there, because we're going to continue to study what the impact is and then how to mitigate those pieces. But to your point taken. I mean, so this is draft, and if those are pieces that we want to adjust or lessen or remove, we have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that we had concluded that we were going to remove. You've answered my question on the pool. It's a new pool in the same location. I thought we were going to remove the lot 4 parking structure extension from the FMP. I thought.
Since we just haven't gone back to the board or that, I mean, so we're managing within the existed approved plan, but we certainly intend to make those adjustments.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a benefit? We've got a lot going on and not a whole lot of time. Is there benefit to going back to the board quickly with a minor modification to the FMP? Not a whole full-blown, make massive changes, but just, oh, by the way, we're going to eliminate the lot 4 extension.
Go ahead.
So I would say that we don't necessarily need to revise it. Like, we could do it in a more timely way, in a more thoughtful way. I think probably what we want to do is remove it from this document because we don't want it out there as a possibility, because we really were looking at not going in that direction for that parking structure. And we were trying to figure out other options. The other thing is, when we did the facilities master plan, we taught less than 10% of our classes online. And now it's 25 to 30%. And so part of the EIR piece of this is also looking at what our actual parking needs are. So I think probably the best thing to do is not have that lot 4 extension here, because I'm not convinced that, I really don't think we're going to go down that road. So we don't want to raise the specter of it.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend that we do that. Yeah.
We can actually even do it before we go to our board meeting on the 15th. So
yeah,
wonderful feedback.
And we could say new pool, but like in asterisk,
Existing
same location. Like,
Yes.
not, say current location, new pool or whatever.
Yeah,
Great.
I would strongly recommend we do both of those things and that we do them for our upcoming board meeting and you still have time to.
Yeah. To
Yeah.
clarify.
Not publish that agenda, so we can absolutely make those adjustments.
Yeah.
And then just remembering that the full draft bond
Mhm.
resolution language that was, you know, all of the whereases is something that also we'll make sure to take a peek at.
Yeah, no, I'm just one trustee here, and so I think you.
No, I
wanna
think
make
it's,
sure,
those are
John,
good
that-
points.
So
Yeah, John,
I have a
think-
question on that. I don't remember all the lists, all the projects in the facility master plan list. I mean, I vaguely remember the presentation. I probably have it filed away deep in some cabinet someplace. But it seems like it would be helpful to have it visible in a simplistic list form or something. Because I tried to read through this in advance to get a feel for what it was. And
But I
Didn't quite
think
get it.
doing this is a simplistic list, and the other thing is,
well, we're referencing, so, okay, so this, I have kind of a question comment both on this slide and the slide to come, which is the actual draft language. So I don't want to, I can make it now, Candace, or I can let you get to the next slide.
Why don't we do this? Let me just make a quick comment and then we'll get to the
Okay.
next slide and then certainly
Right.
Trustee Martin and we'll come back.
All right,
Remember that the facilities master plan in total is going to exceed this bond issuance. And
Yeah.
so, right, I mean, so the amount of work that has been expressed in the 100 and some odd pages of the FMP is really substantive and very, very large. I think what we're working with, so Charles sort of walked through, here are the things that we hear from the voters that will also have a lot of favorable, outcomes. We're trying to match that feedback with our project list and the initial expressed need of the district, of what we hear from various constituent groups, right? So we've taken this bond feasibility study work to get an understanding of those themes, and you will see those themes being expressed here in a meaningful way. Voters understand, Charles mentioned, they understand when you own a home, there's plumbing and roofing and safety pieces that need to be taken into consideration. So a lot of our utilities upgrades are related to the fact that our aging infrastructure that supports these buildings need to be replaced. So we were thoughtful in trying to choose items that align with where our voters are expressing their favor. The new STEM building, again, there's a lot of interest in supporting STEM activities. And so we tried to pull those pieces out. So I think we certainly can provide the comprehensive list to you all for reference. We were just trying to make some initial recommendations based on what we see with that survey data, and then based on what the conversations have been around the STEM building, sort of being this completion piece of our Serafian building, a new student services building, and a new academic building being the largest construction pieces that we're considering. But so I'm not sure that helps that point, other than we are happy to provide sort of a more robust list for you all for your review. But we were just trying to get those categories based on what we were seeing with the survey data.
So I want to go back to my earlier recommendations because because I think I made some very strong recommendations, and I heard the administration, Eric and Candace, say, yeah, we'll do that. But again, I don't want our administration taking direction from one trustee, myself. I want to make sure that John, you and Tammy also agree with me. And
I'm in wholehearted favor of removing lot 4 extension and adding
Some
current
clarity.
location for
okay.
new pool. Yes.
And John?
well, I'm neutral. So
Okay,
so you've got
just-
enough to.
yeah, I just don't want to have one person myself making recommendation and having administration follow that. So, John, you're the chair of this committee, but that's my recommendation. And this is a recommendation that would be going into the agenda that they would be preparing and submitting for Brown Act on Friday of this week for a board meeting next week.
Well, I think I would say that the committee, it would be the committee's recommendation because you have the two of you for sure.
Okay,
It could be a fair topic for full board to discuss the alternatives if they wish.
I don't even want to get into a discussion in a board meeting and even bring up the
Well, that's a valid point.
the potentiality of a lot 4 extension.
I
and-
guess my concern is back to my initial question is just seeing a list, a more specific list at all.
The facilities master plan is 210 pages. And I just looked to try to download it. It was, I think, 222 megabytes, and my computer was not happy.
Yeah, so, I know
There is a project list in the facilities master plan itself. That's where these projects came from. So what we can do is designate which pages those project listings are for reference.
Sure.
I'm gonna keep boring in though, if we're just gonna reference the facilities master plan and the lot 4 extension is in there, and I thought we were gonna update the FMP to remove that. It sounds like we haven't, understood.
Well, Trustee Osterling, we are working on it, but it's because we're also looking at the STEM building, the new STEM building. So what we're trying to do, because we got to a point where it was time to do the EIR, but in looking at doing the EIR, we also hadn't specifically altered the FMP. And so we have HGA working on a reprogramming of sorts for that. And Candace, correct me if I'm saying this the wrong way. So the alteration will be there. Like, we're not planning to go forward on that, but we also don't want to have, we want to have a more methodical revision and update to the plan, which is what HGA is working on right now.
Sure.
So when we're speaking,
I'm gonna keep boring in until we get to where I think we should be.
but I think, Jim, when we're speaking to the community, they will be gone. It'll be right when we're speaking to
Yeah,
the
I'm talking about the board meeting on Wednesday.
Ah.
And I don't want to have the list be, let's go look at the FMP, A, because as you've already mentioned, that's a lengthy document, and B, because it still has the lot 4 extension in there. I am suggesting that we create a list that's more detailed than what we see right here. Not tell people, go look at that 200-page document. And I'm suggesting that the list that we present at the board meeting on Wednesday not include this item.
So
Okay.
one point of clarification, and then maybe let's get into the draft bond resolution language piece and collect some feedback, is the resolution itself, right? So like the slides that we see is, there's nothing official about, we can't issue payment, or we can't go against this document, right? The presentation itself, it's not intended for that. It's only intended to sort of talk about the major areas. The resolution itself is what's going to allow us to use bond proceeds on pieces. And lot 4, the terminology lot 4 extension is not here.
I'm
Or
gonna
the parking.
Okay, I'm gonna continue to be adamant here because you might be telling me what I want to hear, but somehow I'm not hearing what I want to hear. And so I just want to make sure we're all communicating on exactly the same wavelength, and I'm going to stay on this until I'm sure we are. And maybe it's me.
It's okay.
but let me be very specific.
Let me interject my thought,
Yeah,
which
go ahead,
is
John.
similar to Jim's, but not exact. So I understand when we get to the language we're going to see on the next slide, that language needs to be a little generic and a little flexible, because life happens between now and the time we get there. On the other hand, when we passed the 150 million, I think it was, Measure P, there was a pretty specific list of projects that it was going to fund. And we knew what they were. And we saw the list. And there were things that happened through all those buildings, and we repurposed the circadian and different things. But by and large, we basically did the major projects that were on that list, which was a subset of the entire master plan that we were working on at the time.
Thank you, John. And let me cut in here. So Candace, you've already said the entire list is more than this bond issue. It's probably roughly twice. Okay. So we're not going to fund everything on the FMP with this bond issuance. So I'm asking that we take a subset of the bond of the total FMP as to what we're going to issue for this. I'm asking that we not tell people to reference the whole 200-page FMP. And I'm asking that the list that we present on Wednesday to the board include this stuff at some more level of detail. And even though it's still in the FMP, it excludes the Lot 4 parking structure extension, because it's probably going to be removed from the FMP, but whether it's removed or not, it isn't going to be part of this first bond issuance.
Yes,
Now,
so we are on different pages. So let me clarify, and then let's get into, so my intention of saying for us, meaning the subcommittee, like if you wanted to see the full project list as expressed in the FMP, we can reference that. That's not for the general public. I don't know that that's how we would approach. We very similar to Measure P as you're describing, we had a project listing. But I also want to clarify, our project list can be larger than the bond issuance. We may not do everything based on the amount. We have cost escalations that may prevent us. We may issue, this says $645 million. And maybe Maurizio wants to speak about this a little bit more when he gets into the next slide. So I'll pause. But we may issue 645, and the projects that we've identified may be more than that.
I'm taking control. I'm chair. I get to take control. So I'm going to reconcile between Jim and Candace here. So we want a more specified list.
Sure.
Obviously, there's certain things we don't want on it. But, and obviously we realize that more specified list, it's not the full gamut, but you're going to err on this side of including a few more things on the list, because you can, if for whatever reason we have more money and you can do more, it's okay as long as it's on the list, but you can't go the other way.
No. Yeah.
So you have to make sure the list is bigger than possibly what we're going to be able to fund.
It's in the resolution. It's in the resolution already. That language is there. There's more specificity and flexibility. It's
Perhaps could we let's transition to the draft resolution, and then
Let's transition to the draft resolution.
Reopen this conversation when Maurizio has an opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you, Candace. Yes, so the resolution that you have in your packet and that will go forward to the board will include this 75-word ballot language, which, John, as you correctly stated, is more of a generic kind of all-encompassing language that the voters will directly see and vote upon. Largely, this is driven by statute, but it's also largely driven by the polls that Charles and his team get from the electorate. To hit on what we just discussed previously, the project list is something that's attached to the resolution and is a requirement for Prop 39. And as Candace was alluding to, once that project list is set, that is what restricts the district in funding use of bond proceeds to fund projects. So typically we incorporate by reference sometimes the master plan in order to give the district as much flexibility as possible in order to use those bond funds in the future for those projects. So that's something to keep in mind. In addition to the resolution, the draft language, it'll also include a tax rate statement, which essentially outlines the average tax rates when these bonds are outstanding, the expected debt service. All of these are estimated numbers that will be presented to the voters. But circling back to the project list, it really does restrict you with what the voters approve. So that's just something to keep in mind. In addition to
Exhibit A that's going to be in the voter pamphlet has a more extensive list than this. And maybe John and Jim would be happy if we pulled what's going to be in the voter pamphlet and presented that. That's Exhibit A.
Could you repeat or kind of rephrase that? The Exhibit A project is more, it's broader, but it also includes by reference the master plan, just to give the district the greatest flexibility.
Okay.
So Trustee Silver, you're talking about A1, this piece that's already attached to the.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to find it and I can't find it quickly. I know it was sent to us.
You're talking about the previous slide.
No, the actual PDF of the Measure 2022 ballot.
8 pages of whereas.
Oh,
And
right,
then
right.
go to
Okay.
page 9, which says Exhibit A full text ballot proposition.
Mhm.
And this is what will be in that
Correct.
newsprint booklet.
Correct.
And in there is more detailed language of the kinds of projects that we're looking at.
Correct. And that's to give the voters a little bit more detail of the projects. And again, as Candace mentioned, these are being pulled from the master plan. So what we typically like to do as well is just incorporate that by reference. These are broad examples. And like I mentioned, once the resolution, if approved and approved by electorate by that 55%, the district these are like the 4 corners of its guiding principles of what it can use the bonds for.
But maybe pulling that language that's already existing, putting it in a list would be what John and Jim are looking for.
Oh, and you mean for the presentation for the board next?
Yes.
Oh,
What language, what list are you looking at?
It's not in list form, it's in paragraph form.
Right.
It's the Exhibit A. Yes, Exhibit A to the resolution.
Yeah, I'm reading Exhibit A.
Yeah, keep going. Complete basic repairs and upgrades like
Okay.
replacing leaky roofs, old rusty plumbing, faulty electrical systems, repair on, okay, then the next paragraph, modernize classrooms, labs, equipment to keep pace with current industry standards, computer. So, those 2 paragraphs right there have a little more detail. Then down below that, a couple paragraphs, ensure student safety and campus security, improving security lighting, emergency communication systems, smoke detectors, fire alarms. So there's quite a bit that's already sitting in that PDF.
So if I could suggest that maybe in the short run, maybe it would be possible to make a notation in the FMP that the parking garage is, or the extension is not under consideration.
Sure, I
And-
mean, I think that was our intent. There is an amendment
Okay.
plan to the FMP related to those two pieces. They're just not going to happen before
Well, I think,
for us to call for the bond language. So if we want to remove from the PowerPoint presentation, because the parking lot, none of that is expressed in what voters
Right.
are going to see. So
I
we can remove that.
yeah, I totally get that. I think that it needs to come out of the PowerPoint, but I also think that we need to find a way to make some sort of notation in the facilities master plan where it talks about the parking garage extension that, you know, per an upcoming amendment, this is not under consideration or something. Because I hear what Trustee Osterling is saying, and I think there is a concern that even if it's not here in the language, that somebody who, you know, someone who had concerns originally might go and look at the FMP and say, but it's still here. Is this a bait and switch? Is that, Jim,
no.
does that,
Yeah, so I'm in favor of the idea of giving ourselves as much flexibility as possible. And the most flexibility is to reference the master plan, and just in round numbers, that might be twice as much as the actual bond. And then we can move things around. But we all know that the neighbor group to the south
Right.
has serious heartburn over that parking structure. And we've done an excellent job of managing them and getting them to stop their vocal opposition. And we don't want to have that resurface at the very time that we're trying to pass a bond measure. So in our perfect world, it's not there. In the real world, it's still there, and we want to reference it. So somehow, some way, we need to either pull the whole list out of the master plan and just remove that item, or we need to reference the master plan and, as Erica suggested, reference that it's going to be removed. We want to leave sleeping dogs lie. We don't want to have that brush fire flare up again and sabotage this bond issuance. So
So-
our board meetings are public meetings, and we.
so why don't Candace and I try to figure out the best way to do this in order to, because, you know, there are processes that we need to do, but I want to make sure that it's very clear, even as we're going through the process, because sharing the fact that we're not planning to do that is part of the information process. But you know, in terms of going through shared governance and saying, here are the amendments, but in the short run, I think we need to make some sort of notation. So I can work on Candace. I can work with Candace on that.
Erica, I forget, but did the board not already direct that to be removed? I know we just,
You didn't take formal,
not in a formal way.
yeah, I don't think you took a formal, notice of it.
Understood.
But we
I think our
will,
intention at the time was to complete the EIR and make all of the amendments at one time.
yeah,
Because to do it twice, we'd be paying for that amendment process twice. But here's what we could immediately do. We could immediately adjust the slides.
Yeah, let's certainly do that.
yeah.
That's a quick win. I think
Yeah.
it's something that we can do before it gets noticed on our Friday agenda is the adjustment of those pieces that you've already given. We remove those pieces. They are not articulated here. That's great feedback. We can do that before Friday.
Okay, but one more question. I thought we were going for the lower bond amount at the.
Well, wait, I'm on, Jim. Well, let's get to the amount next. I
Okay.
want to talk about this list still.
Oh, okay. Go ahead,
So
John.
I've been letting us sort out the parking and this lot 4 thing. And now that that's sorted, I want to make, I think, a significant point. Most of what I'm reading is centered on looking inside the circle and figuring out what we want to do. And what I don't see in any of this is as much vision as I think we need to inject into this process. We're looking at a facility master plan that's centered on what we have. We're looking at projects that center on what we have. We're asking voters for nearly $700 million to fix up what we have. And when I read that list and I realize it scored high on the assessment, the vast majority of what we're asking voters to do is spend $700,000 to fix our sewers and plumbing and all this important infrastructure stuff, which we're coding in STEM and some other really important words. Okay, the project list in Measure P included new buildings where we wanted a new building, or exactly redoing a library. I think of a list as redoing this building to serve these students. I don't think of it, to me, that's the project list. It's not whether that means new toilets or plumbing or wires or whatever else, which I realize are an important part. When I read this bond initiative, upgrade labs, that's good, not bad. Nothing in here is bad. Number 2, improve student access. Now that's my favorite, but we'll get back to it. Fix deteriorating infrastructure and remove asbestos and lead. So basically 3 of the 4 verbs in here are centered on routine maintenance. And there's 1 verb in here, access, to improve student access. And I want to talk about that because to me, if we're going to, we have 7 districts, $700 million. And if we can't say to people that on our list is finding satellite campuses, then what are we doing? It's easy for us that are close to PCC Maine on Colorado to appreciate it's the center of the universe. But where I live, PCC isn't the center of the universe. It's not exactly Pluto, but it's someplace further out than Mars. And it's just as easy to get to Citrus or Rio Hondo or ELAC. And why in the world do I want to spend $700 million to fund Pasadena? On our list is building housing for homeless people. I got an idea. What about building a school so the people in my district can get to it and actually learn and do what we're supposed to do? I think we have to be more specific. To me, it'd be extremely positive, and we don't want to maybe identify the exact area because we know that that's not good for the bond issuance. But we can certainly say that we are trying to bring satellite campuses to the areas of the district in need. We can define need later on this ballot initiative. We can say we're going to do more than just fix toilets and rewire a few things and make sure that we have STEM labs, which we all think are fantastic. We can do something outside the circle. We can do something where people need it most.
So yes, and I appreciate sort of the passion.
Well, you're getting the passion, okay, because I've been on this horse for a long
Appreciate the
time,
passion.
right?
I
And
appreciate
I'm sorry,
that. It's okay because
but this is way too egalitarian into facility maintenance for me. I mean, we're asking them to fund facility maintenance.
Let me.
I want to fund some new buildings. I want to fund some new labs. I want people to know we're funding new labs. I
We
want people
do
to know
too.
satellite campuses
Yes.
are important.
Yes, we do too. Okay, so remember, what you're seeing on the slide on the screen is the limited 75-word requirement. It can be no more than 75 words. So that's the initial piece. If you look at the whereas clause here, whereas a local college facility improvement bond measure for PCC would establish permanent satellite campuses in areas around the district, increasing access to a college education for local residents. That allows us to do everything that you've just passionately described. It's
And-
just not in the 75-word language.
And I hope when a list comes back that it's above the line on the list. Now I realize the list that's coming back is gonna be more than we can fund. But to me, the list needs to be more project focused and not, not plumbing, electrical.
But
all
John,
the
that's
different
why,
components of a project,
John,
right?
John, that's why we paid for surveying the voters. They surveyed likely voters.
I got
And
it.
if this is what appeals to our likely voters, then we should use verbiage that appeals so this bond will pass. This doesn't limit us at all. We want the money so we can make these
The concept,
buildings.
and so I'm sure there are greater political minds than mine that wrote this. But when I read this, I said, why would I vote for that?
But
I understand
researched-
infrastructure.
They
I understand
researched and they
infrastructure.
found, I think that passion can be very good, but data could get the job done. And they
So
looked at the
let's
data.
get away from the concepts, Tammy, and talk specifics. So we know the concept of deferred maintenance is important to voters. It's the top one on the list. I'm not against deferred maintenance, but the way I read this, that's all it is deferred maintenance. That's all I'm reading is deferred maintenance on this list. Okay.
So maybe
On the
Upgrade-
70, are you
upgrade,
saying on the
fix.
75 words?
Yeah.
Are you specific? So basically what you're saying is that unless the 75 words makes reference to a satellite campus, you do not believe that it is an accurate or what you think should be on the bond. Is that?
I believe we need to reference to voters without being specific where, of course, that new classrooms to improve student access through new classrooms, labs, and satellite facilities, something like that, rather than specifying things like plumbing and electrical, roofs, plumbing and electrical. We're breaking out the parts of deferred maintenance, but we're not addressing the big concepts. that we
That's where
want
our
new,
publicity, that's where your contacts with your community and our mailing and our publicity and the talks you'll be giving to groups will explain it. But in the 75 words, each word is so precious.
And there
It
is
has to
nothing more
drive the
communicative.
passage.
I'm
It
sorry,
has
Tammy, I
to
didn't mean
drive the
step on you.
passage of this bond. And an emotion cannot rule over data when the stakes are so high.
I think Charles was going to weigh in just.
Okay, wait,
Yeah,
I'm gonna let, Jim, did you have a comment?
I do.
Go ahead.
Let me say what John was saying in a less passionate way, because it's not about the passion. I understand that 75 words is a really, really limited number of words, and we have to be incredibly frugal with our words. But I agree with John that we haven't been frugal with our words, in that we've gone to great lengths and extent to be describing all of this deferred maintenance, and it can be described in 2 words, deferred maintenance, leaving you more words to hit more items on the list, whether it be satellite campuses, 2 words, or fixing red tagged and yellow tagged buildings. So I think we can go to fewer, we can use fewer words to describe the deferred maintenance portion of this, leaving more words for other things.
I think
Exactly what I
Charles-
was trying to say. Thank you.
Charles was going to weigh in on just
Yeah.
maybe what he sees with other districts and us and all of that piece.
Yeah, no, the feedback is appreciated, and I hear the point that there are a lot of words in this current draft, and I'll emphasize current draft, that are expended on sort of, and I wouldn't call it maintenance because these are major capital projects on the scale of a college facility. We need to keep in mind a couple of things. One, the 75-word ballot question are the most important words in the entire bond process. It is the last words that every voter reads right before they mark yes or no. So these words have to be optimized from a political standpoint in order to maximize our chances for success. And thus, really, we should be relying on the poll to drive how we choose those words carefully. We can all sit here and speculate as to what will resonate with voters and what won't, and we'll all have different opinions. So I recommend we trust the data. That's how virtually all ballot questions are written. So, you've provided helpful feedback. I think we can incorporate that in the questions that we ask in this follow-up survey, and then we can gather the data that we need in order to come back with a updated recommended ballot question. But I will say that terms like deferred maintenance are not widely understood. Terms like satellite campuses without some explanation of what that means are not widely understood. So we also have to write this so that it resonates with a lay audience, not an expert audience, because that's who's ultimately going to have the final say on this.
So Charles, it's your view that the language we're looking at here, regardless of what the bond issues and your other clients are going to be really used for, the language looks like this because this is tested and proven to be effective with the voters?
Well, it needs to be a fair summary of your intended bond program, right? And we have to make sure it meets that test. Ultimately, what determines how you can spend bond dollars is the project list, which is not word limited. It's what's in Exhibit A of the draft resolution. It's reprinted in the voter pamphlet and available to all voters. So that's where we really have to make sure that we've captured all the potential projects. But yes, the 75 words, again, is the most important political document in this whole process. So we got to make sure it's optimized.
Okay. Yeah.
And this language that you're looking at, honestly, is what tested at 65% in our initial poll with a few tweaks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
But
We have
I think to Trustee Martin's point,
Go ahead.
maybe to Charles's point, I think our second poll out in June, remember, we're going to do that and then share out that data at the July meeting. And so receiving this feedback from you all this evening, we can test those pieces and then present the data at the July board meeting.
Fair.
So we have some time to work on this, but not a whole lot. We need to be efficient from here to what's the deadline for submitting our ballot
What a
measure?
great segue.
Well, don't segue because we still
No,
haven't
we got to
talked
get
about
to the dollar amount. We have the dollar amount question to address too.
I think we can deal with that quickly. These are merely placeholders, and they're going to be informed by the tracking poll. So read those as X's, not numbers.
Understood, but I'm pretty sure that the board, when they received Charles's last feedback, if I recall, the will of the board was the lower number, and I would like those in the placeholders for the board on Wednesday. John and Tammy, am I remembering that correctly?
No, I'd rather have more.
There was
I'd rather
mix.
have the middle part, the middle number. I don't want the low number. I think we should.
I
go
only
for it.
remember two numbers, Tammy, a low and a high.
They did. Is there another slide? There were 3 numbers in the.
Well,
The $20, the $20.
$20, right. Put the $20 in there, please.
Okay.
Because
Yeah, so
we've
that-
already, I think, rejected the high number. It doesn't poll as well. It still polls okay, but the cushion goes down.
Yeah, we can certainly put the 565 million
I-
number in the $20 tax rate. That's fine.
2.0 cents per hundred. I'm
Yep.
pretty sure that's the will of the board, as I recall. That's just
It was
not
a
my
mixed
personal
bag,
preference.
Trustee Osserline. I mean, Trustee Silver was like, swing for the fences. We should go for the, so I don't think that there was I didn't feel like there was go the smaller amount. We absolutely can, but there wasn't general consensus that that's what we were going to use the data, the second polling data, to give us more feedback. I thought that's what we agreed to.
Well, this is a topic that's going to come to the board under like A and B, project list and then how much, right? So for the time being, why don't you just use XXX, comma, 0000000?
That we can do. Yep, that's
Just-
a great suggestion.
Just take it out. And then
Yeah, and
the
then
board
offer
will
the
address it in greater detail as a board and
Yeah,
fill in the X's.
that's fine too.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I get a little passionate about this. And Jim summarized my comments perfectly, thank you. But, I think for those of us in the outer parts of the district, there could be a little bit, and I realize you're doing all the science on the polling and all that, and it's great stuff. But there can be a little bit of an attitude like, why do I want to do this? To help those rich Pasadena folk do this. You know what I'm saying? And I realize not all Pasadena is rich Pasadena folk, okay? But I'm saying that it kind of sets up for those that are more out away an idea that gives an impression that I'm going to pay the tax, and if my children decide to go to PCC versus some other community college or something else, it's going to benefit them up there.
Mhm.
And we need to make this real, because the other thing you need is you need a core of people who are passionate about it that spread the word. And they've got to believe and know that it is meaningful and pertinent to them. And, I was like the largest proponent in the world for the first two master plans. I was the guy hit my head walking in the old gymnasium down those steps, and the pipe went across, and I'm not even that tall, and I said, we've got to redo this campus. But now with such a beautiful campus, I think, because we didn't really address it, to my opinion, in great detail in prior surveys, I think there's a possibility to say we're not just improving the circle, we're expanding it.
Yeah.
And we are going to create access through technology and maybe not satellites is the wrong word, but we are going to make sure our district can get the education they need. And that's what I want to see coming out in this, not there's a campus up there that needs some improvements. Because I think, to me, that's the sell.
Yeah, and Charles, I'd like your feedback on this. I get a lot of feedback from my constituents that basically say, school boards and community colleges, they'll always ask for more money and more buildings. And when I tell them we're going to use this money to pay our share of the red tag Serafian building, so we can get out of the science village, the trailers, and we have 4 yellow tagged buildings that aren't red tagged. They're still in use, but they're not at the level of use from a safety perspective, but also from a effective instruction level. That's compelling. I don't know what you think, and maybe I just hang around with fiscal conservatives, but I can sell that to them. But maybe those aren't the majority of the voters. What's your thoughts on that, Charles?
No, I think the way you've framed that message is basically, describing the problem. Why is it that we have to make these investments? Well, here's the severity of the situation we have to deal with, right? And I do think voters will respond to that. And to the point about sort of how opinions vary geographically, certainly that's true. The survey research that we do is geographically represented. So, in the same proportion that Arcadia voters or Rosemead voters are in the electorate, it will be in the sample too. So that will show up in the data.
And I really appreciate what you are doing. And obviously we want to be very smart about it. But, someplace I just have to put a stake in the ground here to reach the people that need it most, and sometimes they don't vote, but they're still the ones that are in our district that need it most. We're worried about the homeless because they need it most. Well, we need to be worried about the people that need it most. Okay, I won't say more on it.
All great points, and I think we've got a couple of action items to complete before Friday. So we'll make sure that we stay on top of that, and then I'm sure we'll get into a robust conversation at our board meeting on the 15th.
Okay, you're going to talk about timelines now, right?
Yes. Let me get there because we still have the tentative budget to talk about.
Is that the timeline for how long this meeting is going to go, or the timeline for the bond?
I think Charles is going to cover these last two slides for us.
Yeah, and we've talked about a lot of this already, so I'll move quickly because I know you have other agenda items. So where we are now, we've done the initial feasibility study, as you all know. The next steps in the process are I'm working with the marketing team at PCC to begin now, since we just passed the June primary election, to begin rolling out the informational communication about the district's consideration of a bond measure. That's the consensus building piece here represented in the timeline. As we do that, we'll also be conducting the next round of opinion research and bring those results back to you in July, and using that data finalize the bond resolution and documents for your approval in either July or early August. And we'll talk specifically about those dates in just a minute. And then once the board takes that action to call for the election, placing the measure on the ballot, we then have to move into the private independent advocacy campaign. As we discussed at your meeting in February, no public resources can be used to advocate for the passage of the bond measure. And if you just go to the last slide, Candace, so this just lays out the dates that we've been talking about. So obviously the meeting next week on June 15th, where the full board will have access to the information we've been talking about here. At your July 6th subcommittee meeting, we plan to have the tracking survey results available, along with an updated version of the bond resolution. That same information will go to the full board on July 13th. And if the board's ready, we could potentially adopt the resolution at that time. But the deadline to qualify for the ballot isn't until August 12th. So I know that there's also some talk about finding a date for a special board meeting that first week in August, so that we have maximum time to finalize these decisions. And then with that action, we move into that private independent advocacy campaign, moving towards Election Day. So that's sort of what we have in store.
Okay,
Any final questions?
I think we got them out. All right, so I think we're going to move forward by moving back to tentative budget.
And John, before we do that, I want to thank everybody on the Zoom meeting here for listening to all of this. This is really important, and I think it's easier to have these kind of discussions in the subcommittee than in the main board meeting. So thank you for hearing us out and responding to our questions and concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, tentative budget.
All right, I gotta reorientate my mind.
Yeah, you want to take a breath, Candace?
It's okay, Jesse's here too, so.
You want to, maybe we can talk about meeting schedule or something simple to give you a chance?
It's okay.
Do we, can we allow the consultants? to
Yeah, the
have
crew
what's left
can,
of their
the
evening?
crew, if you
guys
haven't
don't
had
have
enough
to.
by now,
Yeah.
I'll repeat what I said before.
Yeah.
Would that drive you off or what?
Yeah, you guys don't have to sit through
You
our
can
budget
drop off.
approval.
Thank you all.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let me get the slides up and then we will jump in because we've got. All right, so our tentative budget, governor's May revision and tentative budget conversation that we do at this time every year. So welcome, Jesse. Hi, Jesse. Is here with us as well. Our quick agenda of what we're going to cover is what we normally do every year. We want to give some clarity around what the state and what the conversations around the budget are looking like. So we have some conversations about the California Community College Roadmap for California's future. This is sort of this new expressed vision. A summary of our 2022-23 budget outlook, some legislative responses and priorities that we're seeing expressed at the state. We're going to cover really quickly then what our tentative budget summary is, and then our projected fund balances, as well as do a quick overview of our CARES expenditures of where we are as of March of this year. All right, so the governor, so there's a lot of conversation at the state just around sort of the projected surpluses that have been sort of anticipated last year, largely based on sort of the pandemic and the income in California's most wealthy being higher than what was projected, and then therefore having some surplus. There's about $4.2 billion in surplus that has been designated for Prop 98 funding. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that this evening. But the CCC Roadmap to California's Future is really sort of describes the metrics and the new goals that then align with the CCC's Vision for Success goals. So those 4 new areas that the state is really having conversations around is greater student educational outcomes. We'll talk about that. Advancing equity work continues to be a priority for the state. Increased intersegmental collaboration, which is actually a really interesting conversation that's happening between UC, CSU, and the California Community College. And then, of course, improved workforce preparedness in the form of certificates and job preparation. So in thinking about those 4 new metric areas, what the governor has done is really try to think about what the governor's CCC roadmap. So each segment, so UC has a multi-year roadmap, CSU has a multi-year roadmap, and now CCC has a multi-year roadmap, and as expressed by the governor. And that roadmap has now been sected and aligned with the Chancellor's Office Vision for Success goal. And so, which adds increased support in both ongoing and then one-time funding. So examples of that would be, there is commitment and thought process in the Vision for Success goals in terms of increasing our transfer rates, right? So the Chancellor's Office has expressed, hey, it wants a 35% increase in transfers to either UC or CSU by 2022. There's a baseline there. Well, now the new governor's roadmap has distinct items that help align and push the segments to work more closely together. There's conversation around, again, this unwavering commitment to equity and additional funding for new programs, ongoing and one time, that help to continue to support that. So as we're watching both the ongoing expressions of an additional funding as well as the one-time funding pieces, it's important that we're thinking about those things and how we align that to our local sort of operational pieces. So this is sort of what's being expressed at a real sort of macro level. These ongoing resources we'll cover first. So because of the surplus, there is, and these are statewide numbers. This isn't just the California Community College, but this is statewide sort of a budget. So the COLAs that are being introduced and discussed is about 500, that they expect to have $550 million of ongoing investment in COLAs. A student-centered funding formula increase of about $375 million. Additional investment and conversation around part-time faculty benefits. That one is really interesting for us because there hasn't been a lot of clarity, and we'll see as the trailer bills come out what the requirements are for that, or how those fundings will come down to the local district area. It's not something that's been completely articulated and expressed, but it is a conversation of this $200 million being invested into the system. Yes, sir.
You say this is the statewide.
Yes.
Now, are you referring statewide for community colleges?
Correct. Thank you
Statewide for all California community colleges?
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, sir. Additional sort of investments in student success completion grants that we'll talk about. And then these other categories, there's some technology modernization, ongoing funding that's being expressed. So these are sort of the large bucket areas that the governor is looking to make those investments in. One of the interesting pieces that I think is really, I think it's really important and really connected to student outcomes is this sort of college affordability piece that the governor's office and then the chancellor's office is really working for. So the expression of $50 million in ongoing support for student in terms of expanding Cal Grant eligibility around financial aid. So there's been a lot of focus around how to, now I will say in the January budget, it was 100 million. Now it's 50 million, and that's okay. But there is on increased focus in how we help our students afford college. And so this ongoing piece is really important because it doesn't hit us one time. It's a commitment to continue to help students programmatically through the financial aid process. Yes, sir.
Are these numbers in addition to the numbers on the previous slide, or are they a part of the numbers on?
So this $50 million is coming in this little pie right here.
Oh, okay. I missed that one.
Yeah. Good question. Thank you.
Okay.
There's $10 million that's being expressed also in augmenting financial aid offices and staffing pieces, as well as $20 million in one-time funds to help with AB 540 students for emergency grants. And so we pulled this slide largely to say that there is a lot of focus on not only retaining and bringing students back, but also kind of helping them afford college and making it meaningful for them ongoing. Now, so we talked about sort of these large bucket categories that exist in terms of ongoing funding. These are the one-time investments that we're seeing that the governor's budget expresses for the system. We're really excited because there's $1.5 billion in deferred maintenance money that is being expressed in the budget. And so that's really important because for many years, we had not received any funding. Last year, we received a larger accounting of deferred maintenance dollars. I think, again, the state is trying to think about how it invests in the facilities pieces on each of the campuses. And so as we're thinking about those dollars and our bond project lists right? Things that we can potentially cover with deferred maintenance, we will do so. So it's great. We may be able to pick some of the items out of the FMP and use these sort of pieces to not construction pieces, but like deferred maintenance pieces that we may potentially be able to tag some projects for. There's also this really interesting block grant funds, $750 million of grant, block grants that we'll talk about. Lots of funding to help with one-time funding for enrollment, retention, sort of like how do we bring students back? How do we have creative strategies to bring students back? Lots of sort of technology pieces, Common Course numbering, adult healthcare pathways, et cetera. So, but those two pieces, the deferred maintenance piece, as it relates to one-time funding, and the discretionary block grant is the largest sort of one-time investments that are being made system-wide.
Okay, I have another question.
Of course.
So what I don't see here, and it may be someplace else in the greater California budget, but what about more support or relief for Calpers and Calstrs?
Yeah, we were hoping for greater investment. I think the current commitment is to keep us at our funding level. Jesse may want to speak to this a little bit more in specific, but I think all of us across the system are probably a little disappointed that some of the surplus hasn't been really greatly directed there. But it does help maintain our current levels as they are today.
Yeah,
I know that's a great thing that Trustee Martin, you're always really attuned to. And I think there's continued advocacy at the Chancellor's office level and at the state level to do that. But, and Erica, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to that, but I certainly say we were disappointed in not seeing the significant investments there.
Well, and the advocacy that we've been doing is around the 750 million block grant, because from where we sit, obviously that would be a logical place to use, logical pot of funds to pay down PERS and STRS. But, looking at some of the other things like the potential passage of AB 1505, which would rebench the FON, we're concerned because I'm with you, Trustee Martin. It would be much better if they had said, and this pot of money is to pay down this obligation. But for whatever reason, politics, they didn't go there.
All right, so some of that physical plan and instructional support dollars, the expression largely that we're seeing at the state level is really this emphasis on energy efficient projects. And so there's a lot of conversation around that and its sustainability. And so we'll probably see some more conversation about that $1.5 billion. So this is what Erica just raised in terms of the $750 million block grant. There'll be trailer bill language, but here's what it is as of today. So it can be used for any purpose as determined by the local board. Its intended uses, though, the categories that have been laid out right now are in professional development, campus security infrastructure, technology infrastructure, developing open educational resource and zero textbook cost degrees, supporting mental health and wellness needs of students and staff. So there's a lot of flexibility. I mean, looking at even just this small list, they're very diverse, right? They're very different. And so what we're concerned about is the fact that the initial expression, so we have to satisfy all outstanding claims for state mandated local program costs. Okay, but the second bullet point is probably what hurts PCC the most, which is that the allocation of the block grant will be based on our 2021-22 actual reported FTES RP2 estimates, which we know is significantly, our enrollment numbers are significantly diminished. I think it's like 13,007 something. And so that's the number that they're going to use to calculate our allocation as of today.
Isn't everyone's numbers greatly diminished?
It is, but sure. But if they had picked another year, right, at least our allocation portion would be much higher. And so, you know, I just think that there was some conversation about, you know, they're not going to get rid of that $750 million, to be quite honest, using our P2 21-22 numbers. It'd be
I guess
challenging.
the way I'm understanding what you're saying is it's going to be our P2 21-22 numbers in ratio compared to everyone else's. So ours may be down, but if everybody else's is down, the percent might stay the same
Or higher.
Yeah, so it's
lower.
you know, obviously lower immediately, nominally lower is bad, but what really counts is if I'm hearing you correctly, it's our percent of the total compared to everybody else.
I think Jesse is gonna.
Yeah, if I could interject. So yeah, I think Trustee Martin, you're absolutely correct. So we only know one delta that Chancellor's office have released, but we don't know is what is the per FTS amount that they're going to just distribute to us, because like we all know, the system-wide enrollment is down, but the Chancellor's office have to distribute the 750 million to the whole system. So they can't hold any money back. So how are they going to distribute it? So they have the math is going to have to work with that formula. So,
So there's hope.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah,
So
so
we're
the 10
watching
million,
it closely.
right? Yeah, we're watching it. So the 10 million is a conservative estimate based on what our percentage was in the history, and then how that project out into our current enrollment. So we're very hopeful. Fingers crossed that this number is going to be much higher than the actual number.
Jim, what's your historic rule here? Isn't it always 2%? Aren't we always
2%.
usually 2%?
Yeah, historically, we've been about 2%,
So, you know, we might-
2.1%, yeah.
Yes, we might have hopes for 15.
Mhm.
We'll see.
Look at all these double crossing. So
Okay.
then we also have to record that in the restricted general fund, and we have 5 years to expend the block grant. So that's sort of the initial rules around that funding.
Just real quick, if
Yes,
we're
sir.
still 2%, I know we're down, but if everybody else is down in the same proportion, we're still about 2%, and that'd be about 15 million.
Yeah, right now at this point, they have not released the data publicly yet as far as system-wide where everybody's enrollment is at. There's a couple of districts that, as we know of, kind of maintained their enrollment. So then they're going to be an X factor. So we're hoping that there's not very many of those X factors out there.
And hopefully those that are small districts.
What is our decline in FTES? I think you said P2 off whatever the peak was pre-COVID.
Yeah, we went from about 22,000 down to about 13,700.
Okay.
If you're curious, I've done, it's too depressing. Keep going.
Okay, let's jump into the tentative budget. So we are projecting, so this budget is prepared based on the governor's May revise. So I mean, everything, the legislative is still in negotiation. So we're hoping that many of those will come through and will be signed into law. So at this point, we're projecting to be a balanced budget. We're projecting that we're going to be able to meet our expenditure obligations. So the state apportionment, lottery mandated claim, those are all our major revenue sources. The state apportionment, we're projecting to be about 167 million. And then lottery is is about a third down because lottery is actually funded on our FTES numbers. So this number is about 1 million and some down compared to last year. And then our state mandated claims stayed about the same. And our non-resident tuition, we actually dial this number down a little over 1 million as well, because we have to be realistic about where our actual enrollment is. So, and then the Calstrs on behalf payment. This is actually a pass-through payment. What happens is the state pay a portion usually of the Calstrs expense on our behalf. So we have to record it as a paper entry on our books to recognize the income and also in a way to recognize the benefit as well as the expenses associated. So the on behalf income is 8 million. Also the expenses is 8 million as well. So and then also another source of revenue is our categorical and also our student feed. So that's projecting to be about 8.9 million. Our major expense group on top of the line, as always, is our investment in our people. So our salary and benefits are trending about 88.5% of total expenditures. And then supplies and materials are less than 1%. And then our second largest investment, but not by far, is operating expenses and services. Those are kind of like our contracts obligation that we have. A little bit for capital outlay and also about 1.4 in transfers. And then we're going to show the details in the transfer in the next slide.
I think Trustee Martin had a quick question.
Yeah, so the 8 million Calstrs is embedded in the 172 salary and benefits. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, so it doesn't have it doesn't have a separate line item. It is part of the benefits.
Yeah, I get it. And then my second question is there a hold harmless in place for 22-23?
There is, and we are cutting it very close to our hold harmless number. So our yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say the expression sort of at the state level is that there's conversation around a new funding floor that would impact us. I think it's 24-25, Jesse?
Correct.
In fiscal year 24-25. So hold harmless through 22-23. One thing that I would just say that we're always consistently watching, and we certainly let our chief negotiator on the HR side is around the COLA and those pieces, because if we can't thinking about our P2 enrollment, right? So our enrollment challenges today, if we were to express what that impact is on the unrestricted general budget, it's going to be like $10 million. It could be a reduction based on our apportionment numbers. So Jesse and I are always consistently watching, well, if we were paid on this today, what would that look like tomorrow? So that as we're making decisions, but as Jesse pointed out, if there is a reduction in those pieces, in that funding apportionment, or the new funding floor that's being described is lower, then where is our greatest impact? I mean, where we spend our money is on salary and benefits. And so we just always need to be mindful as we're making decisions today that may impact us in 2-3 years, that it's important that we understand that as we're going through those pieces, that we need to be thoughtful of the future. Yes, Trustee Silver.
Okay.
What percent of our salary and benefits are adjunct, and what percent are tenured faculty?
We didn't. Do you know that off the top of your head, Jesse?
I don't have that on the top of my head, but I can go back and look at the details and yeah, I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question is really a related one to Tammy's, and that is if our enrollment is down by as much as it is, should we not be having budget savings in instruction costs, salaries and benefits?
Well, we have had savings because we've canceled low enrolled classes.
Right. That's my point. So if we're in a hold harmless on the revenue side, and if our instructional budget is going down, it seems like we should be okay. Maybe I'm missing something.
Temporarily.
Today.
Yeah.
You're correct. For this next fiscal year, absolutely.
Okay.
It's when the hold harmless goes away, or when we get more clarity around what the new funding floor is. I think that's when we're going to need to make some decision potentially, or not. I mean, we just don't know what we don't know. My crystal ball is out for repair. And so
Well, I think
we're working on just trying to be cognizant that the decisions today may impact us in 3 years.
And I think Jesse's done a good job of trying to track. One of the reasons that we've done well in the last couple of years is because we were doing well relative to the student success funding formula. We were graduating people, they were taking classes, they were doing, all of the ways in which we make money from the SCFF. So we were getting funded above the hold harmless. But with our enrollment dropping off and students not completing as many classes, or in some cases staying because they don't feel prepared to go to a four-year institution, that impacts the student-centered funding formula part of the equation. Because those are two different things. There's the hold harmless floor, and then there's the money that we can make above that based on our success metrics. Did I say that right, Jesse?
Absolutely. And another factor to our managing costs is also we have a fund obligation that we must meet. And unfortunately, that fund obligation is not a true reflector of our current capacity when it comes to FTES. So the fund is calculated based on our higher FTES number. So although we're trending down, but we don't really have the luxury of reflecting that into our actual hiring.
But I thought I just heard that we're hiring a whole bunch of new teachers.
We did. We had to hire 18 because we had to meet our faculty obligation number, which was
okay.
Right. And that's part of the conundrum here, because we hired 18 so we could meet our faculty obligation number, which is based on our hold harmless amount. And
22,000 students. Yeah.
right. Exactly. And so that's one of the reasons that AB 1505 is such a problematic bill, because if it sets us at 405, if you look at our enrollment, because the FON is driven by enrollment numbers, our FON right now is 405 based on the number of students we have, it should be 275.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
That's what we say.
Yeah. All the powers go to Dr. Andrew Jones for her advocacy.
So
Yes.
Erica, we're hiring.
Did we go to Sacramento?
We're hiring and
I
paying
met
all
with
the-
Portantino last week.
We're hiring and paying all of these faculty. What are they doing?
Well, this is the 18 that are coming in the fall. So
No, I'm just saying in aggregate, we have 405 full-time faculty, and we're down by a third. What are our full-time faculty doing?
but to keep in mind, we also have 900 adjuncts. So those are the folks who have lost their teaching assignments, are the adjuncts.
They're the ones that get hit first.
Yeah.
So like, are we down to 0 adjunct assignments?
No. We have a huge schedule. Like we still have a lot of classes. The other thing to keep in mind is that in the spring, one of the reasons our FTS was down was that we were at 50% capacity in our face-to-face classes. We're not doing that in the fall.
Okay.
So all of our classes will be the right size. So that is one, that was one thing that depressed our enrollment too.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, there are many factors.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so the next slide shows our projected ending fund balance for our different funds. So for the general fund is what we just presented to you, the detailed projection for revenue and expenses. So we are projecting that we will hold still to have a balanced budget. But we are transferring about 1.4 million out of the general fund to meet our other commitments. One of them, the first one off the list, is we're transferring 500,000 to support our campus police to ensure that we have a safe campus. So we kind of modeled a little bit and then trying to see how much more that we need to support them in addition to the revenue we're bringing in from parking and from these other ticketing sources. And then also the 600,000 down at Fund 41, this is actually the college's commitment for technology refresh. So we are committed to making these investments every year. And then the $302,000 down at Fund 79. So this is just a reflection of the money movement that we collect from our bookstore commission. So it travels into the general funds and first, and then we write a check to pay our to reimburse our trust and agency accounts. So overall, this is a snapshot of where we think we're going to be at. One thing to point out is you'll see Fund 42 Measure P that was completely paid off and not paid off, but the funds were exhausted last year, and then this Measure P project is closed. So when we meet back here in December to look at our audit reports, we will not have a Measure P audit report. So we just have the big district audit report. So that's one new thing I'd like to point out. Okay, the next section.
Go ahead. I think Trustee Martin might have a question.
Yeah, I just was going to make a comment back on that. So I listen to the talking heads every morning on Business News, and I certainly know but a thimble of what they know, and they confess that they don't know anything. So, but this seems to me to be an opportune time to be feathering any surplus money we might have thanks to the guaranteed funding into some of these longer term investments that we know we're so far behind on. And not like I drop a whole lot at any one time, because I don't know if things are going to get better or things are going to get worse. But we do know things have dropped significantly from where they were. And so in my mind, if we had some one-time money, this might be a place where it'd be a smart time to move some of it to help with our longer term obligation.
It's really great feedback. I know that we made the $3 million contribution last year, right?
Right.
I think when we get into our adopted budget piece and actually close the books, it'll help us sort of understand what savings are available to us. Some of that, though, priority that we've initially made was to help, if there were savings, to help with the Serafian building overages.
Very wise.
So that's kind of what our initial sort of thought process is around that. But as we close the books and get greater information about what those savings look like, we certainly will take that into consideration as well.
Great.
More to come on that one later. Okay, so the next section will be a update on our CARES and HERF grants. So as of March 31st, we which is the day that we filed our last quarterly report to the federal government, we have received in total. Oh, well, actually, not. I shouldn't use the word receive, because we draw down the money after we spend the funds. So we were granted in total of $64,574,000. So and as of the end of March, we have expensed $28 million and also have $3.4 million in encumbrances. So on the institution portion, we have about $33 million left to spend.
What restrictions are there on that money, the 33 million?
It has to be COVID pandemic related. So we can pay for things such as COVID testing and then refurbishing our buildings or our capacities to make the environment safer. Actually, this is a great segue, because in the Richard Lared, our executive director of facilities, he has prepared a list of all the infrastructure improvements and also our investment into a safer campus at the board meeting next Wednesday. So he will be there after our section to talk about exactly what we did to make our campus a safer place.
Trustee Martin.
I thought at one time it was explained to us that smaller class sizes could also be supported as a COVID measure.
There's a ton so we used CARES funding to help support when we're making the reductions and then being forced to open more sections. We used funding, CARES funding to help with that. We've used CARES funding for lost revenue pieces. So there are as long as we can describe that we wouldn't have had that cost pre-pandemic and we can demonstrate it through audit, we use CARES funding. So we do it for positions. We have some custodial positions that we've helped to fund using CARES funding. So there are a host of different ways that we could use that.
Absolutely. So this slide that we're looking at is our CARES grant related to the student portion. So this portion is for student direct aid only. So this is where Dr. Olivo and her team comes in, and then they send a questionnaire to students to determine what is the need that the students have that they were affected by the pandemic. And then they would, from the financial aid office, wire a funds directly to the student to help them in this situation. So as of the end of March, we were granted a total of 41,752,000 in the student portion. And then as of that day, we've distributed 27,600,000 to the students. So we have a little over 14 million left to distribute. And we'll plan on doing that in the upcoming fiscal year.
Jesse, is there a deadline by which this bucket, the student bucket, needs to be spent by, and same question for the institutional bucket?
So due to great advocacy of our collective finance pesky people, so the federal government did issued a automatic extension for all HERF grants to June 30th of 2023. So we have another year to spend this money.
For both buckets, institutional and student?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So I'm
Keep
sorry.
going. Keep going, Justin.
All
Sorry.
right, so we have one more slide to show you. So our friends at Institutional Effectiveness actually help us to put together a dashboard. So it's a very colorful dashboard, visual presentation of all the different funding that we've, all the different type of things that we spend the COVID money on. So we provide a link here, and it actually takes directly to our dashboard. And oh, sorry, Candace, you probably have to copy and paste that link too.
But
Yeah.
you can't copy a screen, a slide.
Yeah, let me,
Can you
You want
put
me
it?
to pull it up? I have it pull it up.
thank you, Jesse.
No problem.
And the chat is disabled unless the host can chat.
We're not supposed to chat.
Yeah, we can't do that because of the Brown Act. We can't do that.
Okay,
But
so
we can have Mary pass on the link to the subcommittee so that you have it for your record.
Okay.
so this link is once you arrive, it's actually alive in under our financial aid section. So this is a dashboard that kind of shows you, okay, by each of the category, how much do we distribute to the aids to students, and then it also give a percentage. As you can say that it is live because as I hover over it, it kind of updates itself. So we do update these amounts every quarter after we file the quarterly report to the federal government. So we have all these different investment that we made with HERF grants, so such as faculty training for online instruction. Also, we have this portion, other uses 8.2, 8.3. This is actually our vaccine incentive for our faculty members, and also some our students. We conduct a raffle for our students for their efforts in vaccination. And also, we purchased instructional technology. We also purchased hardware for students, such as the loaner laptops and also the hotspots to help our students to be able to gain technology needs during the pandemic. Also, reimbursement for tuition, housing, different categories that we've done so far with the HERF grants. And moving down a little bit, so other than putting numbers and percentages, this dashboard also kind of shows when were the time data points that we actually spend these money. And you can see the first wave of expenditure started in October 2020. And this is pretty close to when the grant actually came to us. And then, expenditure continued, and then there was a peak in July. That this is when we kind of spend our efforts in re-engagement efforts and also our vaccination incentives and so on and so forth until the end of March. And this subcategory over here kind of shows us a visual presentation of by each of those expenditure type, when they happened, and how much we did in each of those timeframes. So again, this is live in our website. And if any time you would like to just kind of see how we're doing or what we're doing the money, what we're using the money for, this is a great place to check. Okay, with that, I'm gonna stop sharing.
We'll be sure that Mary shares that link out to everybody.
Super.
Okay, anything else on tentative budget? Proposed meeting schedule, July 6th, 6 p.m. Sound good?
Yeah.
Future agenda items.
Money.
Anybody want to add to our current list so that we can have longer meetings?
No, well,
I'm sorry,
don't
did
know.
I
I'll
say
come
that
up
out
with
loud?
something.
I'm sorry.
We'll come up with something.
Yeah. I was gonna say, if you have something that should be here, just bring breakfast.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm always looking for that programmatic breakdown, but I'm tired. And
Yeah.
I think we promised that we would give that to you twice a year. So I think it's probably coming up when we close the books on this last year on 21, 22. So I think it would be like in August or September is when we would give it to you, because we could show you for the year.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went
Wore
long.
me down.
We went long. Splendid job, Candace and everybody else, just
Yeah, great job,
unbelievable.
Candace and Jessica.
But
Excellent.
obviously, a couple very, very, very important topics that we've been working on for a very long time.
Yeah.
So that it is what it is. So great appreciation to everybody. Great appreciation to
you.
the staff, and marvelous job you all did.
Yep, they're rock stars.
And unless somebody, really wants to, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
All
All
right.
in favor?
Night,
Yeah.
everyone.
All in
Thank you,
favor, hit the
everybody.
red leave button on the bottom of your screen. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, good night, Alex.